I have the benefit and honor of introducing our next speaker. It's very fitting that we're on a military installation at the time because he is the senior military man in the U.S. Senate. He's a former Marine whose motto is Semper Fi, and that fits our next speaker because Semper Fi means always faithful, and this is a man who has always been faithful to the state of Kansas and the United States of America, U.S. Senator Pat Roberts.
Thank you. Good morning. That's pretty pathetic. Come on, we can do better than that. Good morning. All right. Just one correction, there are no former Marines. Once a Marine, always a Marine. I am delighted to be here. Marco Rubio, thank you so much for coming to Kansas. Our state motto, at aspera per aspera, to the stars through difficulty. That pretty well fits our campaign, I think, Marco. I endorse Marco for several reasons. Number one, he is a friend, he is a colleague, he has helped me. He's the only candidate I know that has mentioned agriculture in this entire campaign. He's helped me as chairman of the Agriculture Committee. He knows our rural way of life. He knows that our farmers and ranchers have the obligation, and what they want to do is to feed this country in a troubled and hungry world, and I thank him for that. The next thing I would say is that Marco Rubio is the only candidate that can defeat Hillary Clinton in the general election. The reason is very simple. The reason is very simple. Hillary Clinton is yesterday. Marco Rubio is tomorrow. There's another good reason that I am supporting Marco. He, among all the candidates, is better versed and knows about the first obligation we have in the United States Congress, and for that matter, the presidency, and that is our national security. He was one of the very first candidates to take up a cause that every member of the Kansas delegation and our governor has supported. We're not going to put any terrorists at Fort Leavenworth. No. Not on our watch, and he has said that repeatedly. Now, I have an email message for Hillary Clinton. And that is, I'm sorry, but Kansans are backing Marco Rubio, and for that matter, you just don't do things like that. I would say that we're not going to put any detainees in Leavenworth. I don't know about, I'm not going to go there. I'm just not going to go there. Lastly, what I want to tell you is when Marco speaks in the Senate, people listen, and that's tough. We move around like a lot of milling cattle there on the floor of the Senate. I wish we didn't do that so much. But when Marco speaks, Democrats and Republicans will stop and they will listen. He has a gift. Whether it's the floor of the Senate, whether it's a crowd like this, or whether it's a great, huge crowd, he inspires people. We desperately need a president that can lead and that can inspire us so that we can recover the America that we know. Marco, thank you so very much for coming to Kansas. I have a great privilege now introducing my friend, my former Senate colleague, and my governor, and your governor, Sam Brownback. Yeah.
Thank you. Hey, good morning, Kansas. How you guys doing? Let's let Marco Rubio hear a big Kansas yell. All right. Good. Let's hear him hear another one. Yeah. Now, the guy was up late last night in Detroit at a debate, you know, and he just gets loaded up and on a plane, and he's here in Kansas all day today. We want to say thank you, Marco. Hey. All right, now, I think this is a great guy. He's great on all our issues. He believes in the things we believe in. He's pro-growth. He's pro-life. He's pro-Second Amendment. He believes in those things. They're in his heart. He's got a soul for this country. He's lived the American dream. He's got that Reagan-esque quality about it. And then on top of all of that, he's a guy that can win and nominate the next Supreme Court Justice of the United States that we've got to have. He can do that. So I'm just delighted he's here. You got to show up at the caucus tomorrow, okay? Promise me you'll show up at the caucus tomorrow. Can I see hands up of everybody who's going to show up? Can I see hands up of somebody that'll bring somebody else with you to the caucus tomorrow? These things are decided by small numbers of votes, and the race is very close. All right, this is it. The guy that will be the next president of the United States that's here in Kansas. Let's give him a rousing welcome, Marco Rubio.
Thank you. Thank you very much. First of all, I want to thank our chairs. We're so grateful for all the work they've put in here today. I want to thank Senator Roberts. Pat is a phenomenal senator and really highly respected, going back to his time on the Intelligence Committee that he used to be in charge of, and now, of course, is so focused on the agricultural issues. And then your governor is just a phenomenal person and someone who I've heard about even before I got into the Senate. We have a lot of friends in common, a man of true faith and conviction, and we're so blessed that he's in public service. And I want to thank all of you for coming this morning. You know, tomorrow you're going to have a caucus here, and I know that usually it doesn't get the publicity of the caucus that your neighbors have or the publicity of the New Hampshire primary, but this year it matters a lot. And the reason why it matters a lot is because in 2016 we're having an election that's perhaps the most important in a generation. What's at stake here is not just the names on the ballot or which party is going to be in charge. We're literally being asked to decide the identity of our nation and the identity of the conservative movement in the 21st century. I can tell you when we're at our best. We're at our best when we're about people's hopes. We're at our best when we're about people's dreams. We are at our best when we are appealing to the belief in a better tomorrow. We're at our worst. Any movement is at its worst when it appeals to your anger and to your frustration, when it asks you to be upset at someone else, or even worse, when it accentuates the most negative instincts in humanity. There has never been in the history of mankind a great movement that has been built on anger and frustration. I'm not saying you don't have a right to be angry and frustrated. I am. You should be. Your political leaders have failed you for decades. And today we're on the verge of being the first Americans that leave their children worse off than themselves. It is not a time unlike the one that Reagan found himself in 36 years ago, when America went through 4 years of a terrible presidency and our role in the world was diminished and our economy had flattened out and our hostages were being held in Tehran and we couldn't do anything about it. But Reagan didn't build the Reagan Revolution on anger and frustration. He built it on hope. He built it on the idea that no matter what we face, because God's hand is upon America, if we are willing to do our part, the greatest days in our history lie ahead. I'm not here to attack anyone. We did plenty of that last night, I suppose. But I acknowledge that the front runner in this race right now is Donald Trump. I don't know Donald very well. I only met him when this campaign started. I know all about him. I've been watching him on TV for years. And all I can say to you is what he says he is and what he'll do are not the same thing. He's been doing this his whole life. He's created a character of himself as this very successful businessman, and he's done it for the purpose of getting people to give him their money, whether it's investing in a building that he's building or buying steaks, Trump steaks, or buying Trump vodka, or buying a Trump mattress, or even worse, enrolling in Trump University. But now he's asking you for your country. Now he's asking you for your vote. He's asking you to make him the commander-in-chief of the most important and powerful military in human history. He's asking him to give you the power to send your 18 and 19-year-old sons and daughters off to war. He's asking you to put him at the pinnacle of the most important government on the planet at a time when this nation needs strong and clear leadership more than ever before. He's asking you to make him president for at least 4 years, which means the way he behaves, the things he says, whoever the president may be, is supposed to set an example for our children. Not someone who you have to cover your children's ears every time they're on television. And so clearly I'm here to ask you not to vote for him, because no matter how you may feel about the things he's talking about, which he has no answers for, if he's our nominee, it will split the Republican Party, and it will be the end of the modern conservative movement. The conservative movement is not built on anger, it is built on ideas and on principles. And that's why I'm asking you to caucus for me. I have not just been a conservative for the last year and a half, I've been a conservative for 15 years in terms of public policy. I have a 15-year record. I think I've been a conservative since I was 8, to be honest with you, because of Reagan. But for 15 years, I have taken conservative policy and turned it in conservative action. I did it in the Florida legislature, a part-time legislature, where I served as the Speaker of the Florida House, where we passed eminent domain laws that are among the best in the country, where we brought vocational education to our schools, where we cut taxes, where we balanced not one but two budgets as Speaker in the middle of an economic downturn without raising taxes on anybody, where we reformed our school curriculum without the federal government and without Common Core. And then I was a private citizen, and I had the chance to run for the U.S. Senate, and I did so in 2010 against the establishment of my own party. The leadership of the Republican Party in Washington, D.C. didn't want me. They wanted the sitting governor of Florida. But I ran because I knew that if he won, he would not be what he said he was. And I'm glad I won, because before that race was even over, Charlie Crist had become an independent. 2 years later, he switched to Democrat to run for governor, lost. Now he's a vegetarian. He keeps switching. I know that's illegal here in Kansas to be a vegetarian, but or at least strongly discouraged. And I'm proud of the work we've done in the Senate. Today, there are additional sanctions on Hezbollah, an evil and horrible anti-Israel terrorist group, because I led a bipartisan effort and we achieved it. Today, the bailout fund that was put in Obamacare to bail out private insurance companies, that was going to use your taxpayer money to bail out private insurance companies, that bailout fund is gone because I led the effort and we did it. Today, U.S. foreign aid around the world is used in a way to encourage countries to prevent human trafficking, which is a scourge on humanity all around the world, because we passed a law that achieved that as well. And today, by the way, you can fire a senior executive at the VA who is not doing a good job, because believe it or not, I worked with Bernie Sanders and we passed a law to give them the power to do that. And by the way, that's about all Bernie Sanders and I are going to agree on anytime soon. And now I'm asking you to caucus for me because I want you to know what you're going to get if I'm President of the United States. First, for the first time in 8 years, you're going to have someone that follows the Constitution of the United States. Someone who will appoint judges and justices, and someone who have policies that protect your First Amendment right, not just to speak freely, not just to believe anything you want, but to live out the teachings of your faith in every aspect of your life. Someone who will defend and protect your Second Amendment right to protect and to defend your own family, because you have a right to protect yourself from criminals and terrorists and anyone who tries to bring harm your way. When I'm president, you'll have someone that believes in the 10th Amendment, because I know that the real change in this country is never going to come from Washington. It's going to come from our homes, our communities, our churches, and our state governments, not the federal government. And you will know that I'm serious about upholding the Constitution, because on my first day in office, as soon as I walk into the Oval Office, I am going to repeal every single one of Barack Obama's unconstitutional executive orders. My voice sound okay? I'm holding on to it barely. I'm trying to count my words. I'm like a pitcher on a pitch count, you know? I usually am much louder, but I'm hurting. All right.
We know about pitchers here.
You know about pitchers, that's right. The second thing you're going to have when I'm president is someone who believes in free enterprise. You know why I believe in free enterprise? Not because my parents left me millions of dollars, but because my father was a bartender and my mother was a maid at a hotel, and the reason why they were able to have a job is because free enterprise works. Thank you. The reason why they were able to have a job is because free enterprise works, because someone who had access to money decided to risk that money to open up a hotel, and it created jobs for them. I know free enterprise works because I live in a community of people who came to get away from socialism. In places where there is socialism, in places where the government controls the economy, the same people always win, and everyone else gets left out. But in free enterprise, it is the only economic model in the world where you can make poor people richer, and you don't have to make rich people poorer, where you can lift everyone up. And so that's why I've always treated this issue seriously in my campaign. If you go on my website, marcorubio.com, you are going to see real solutions on how to fix our tax code, on how to roll back federal regulations, on how to save Social Security and Medicare and balance our budget, on how to fully utilize all of our energy resources. God has blessed America with oil and natural gas and coal and nuclear energy and renewables. We're going to use all of it when I'm President of the United States. And you will see a real plan, not just the lines around the states. You will see a real plan to repeal and replace Obamacare once and for all. When I'm President of the United States, you're going to have a real commander-in-chief. We don't have one right now. We don't have one right now. And to be frank with you, the front runner in this race, Donald Trump, is not prepared to be the commander-in-chief. Anyone who thinks the nuclear triad was a rock band is not qualified to be the commander-in-chief. Now, the world is incredibly dangerous. You have a lunatic in North Korea with nuclear weapons. You have the Chinese government hacking into our computers, stealing our inventions, and taking over the South China Sea. Vladimir Putin is not a heroic figure. He is a thug who is sowing instability in Europe and in the Middle East. Iran is about to get $100 billion of sanctions relief because of Barack Obama's deal with the Ayatollah. And radical Islamic jihadists are spreading all over the world. Today, you can find ISIS affiliates in over a dozen countries. In the face of all of these threats, this president is gutting the United States military. We will soon have the smallest army since the end of World War II. We will soon have the smallest Navy in a century, and we will soon have the smallest Air Force in our history. The average age of an Air Force plane is 27 years old, which means the pilots are substantially younger than the planes. This is unacceptable that the world is growing more dangerous and we're growing weaker. And it's unfair to our men and women in uniform who are going into harm's way with less equipment, less training, and less help. Defense spending, and your governor from his time in D.C. and your Senator Pat Roberts will tell you defense spending is not the cause of our debt. And that's why when I am President of the United States, we are going to undertake a Reagan-style rebuilding of the United States military. When I'm president, we're going to have a real war on terror. I don't want war. We want peace. But in order to achieve peace, you must defeat the enemies of peace. ISIS and radical jihadists, radical Islamists are enemies of peace. When I'm President of the United States, the best intelligence agencies in the world are going to find these terrorists, and our rebuilt military is going to destroy them. And if we happen to capture any of these terrorists alive, they're not coming to Kansas. They're going to Guantanamo. There might be a couple politicians coming to Kansas, on the other hand. To Leavenworth, I guess. Yeah. Anyway, I don't want to get into all that. I didn't go there. Nobody on this stage, don't worry. When I'm President of the United States, our allies are going to know they can count on us again. Let me tell you, I don't think there's an ally that's been more mistreated under this president than the state of Israel. Israel's not just another country. Israel was created for a very special purpose, as a homeland for the Jewish people in the aftermath of the Holocaust. Israel is the only pro-American and free enterprise democracy in the entire Middle East. Basically, if more countries in the Middle East were like Israel, free enterprise, pro-American democracies, our foreign policy would be a lot simpler. But there's only one. And today our president treats the Prime Minister of Israel with less respect than what he often gives the Ayatollah in Iran. The front runner in this race, Donald Trump, has said that he's going to be neutral when it comes to Israel. that in their dispute with the Palestinians, he's not going to take sides. I want you to know if I'm president, I am going to take sides. We are going to be on Israel's side. And the world is going to know that on my first day in office, because on my first day in office, I am going to cancel Barack Obama's deal with the Ayatollah of Iran.
Hey.
When I'm president, we're going to take care of our veterans again. And if you're a veteran, raise your hand because we want to thank you for your service. God bless you. Thank you so much. I often say to Pat Roberts, I hear people tell him, you were a Marine. He goes, I wasn't a Marine. I am a Marine. Once a Marine, always a Marine, believe me. We thank our veterans for their service. We're not taking care of them. Yesterday, we read a report. A few weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, I was in South Carolina, opened up USA Today, front page cover. It said, calls to the VA suicide hotline went to voicemail. Well, yesterday we read the story of a young man who had left a message on the voicemail. They had finally called him back, but it was too late. He had laid down in front of a train tracks and had been killed, committed suicide. They called him a day after he killed himself. Who's going to be held accountable for this? Who's going to be fired over this? Under Barack Obama, nobody. I know there are good people at the VA. I'm not singling them out. But I'm telling you, when I'm president of the United States, if you're not doing a good job at the VA, you will be fired from your job at the VA. In Florida, 1 out of 4 calls to my Senate office is now a veteran fighting with the VA. One of them is my brother. My brother was in the Army, 7th Special Forces. He was a Green Beret from 1968 through 1971. He's 21 years older than me, in case you're wondering. My parents were very optimistic people. They had me in their 40s. One day on a training mission, he jumped out of an airplane and landed bad, knocked out his front teeth. And so every few years, he has to go do have a dental claim fixed with the VA, and it's always a hassle. They act as if they're doing him the favor, as opposed to the other way around, what veterans have done for us. And they always ask him, well, how do we know this happened in the Army? Prove it to us. He says, well, it's the only time I ever jumped out of a plane. That's why I believe the benefits need to belong to the veteran. When I am president of the United States of America, our veterans, you will be able to take your VA benefits to any hospital or any doctor that you want to go see. I want to add one more thing about our veterans before I close. I was reminded a few days ago that many of our veterans don't stop serving America when they come home. I was in Virginia this weekend, and the story on the news was about 3 police officers that had been shot. One of them was killed. She was a Marine reservist on her first day on the job as a police officer. You go to any fire department in America, any EMT department, any police department, you're going to run into veterans. And so I just wanted to take a moment once again to thank our firefighters and our police officers for everything they do for our country and for our communities. For me, this election is deeply personal. America is not just a country I was born in. America is the country that changed the history of my family. Both of my parents were born in another country. They were born on the island of Cuba, into both very difficult circumstances. My mother was one of 7 girls raised in rural Cuba, into a father who was raised one of 19 kids himself in a farming family that grew tobacco in rural Cuba. When he was 6 years old, he got polio. He was the only one of the kids that couldn't work on the farm. He learned to read and learned to write, learned Morse code in order to provide a living for his family because he didn't have the physical ability to work. And he worked hard, but he struggled to provide for his 7 daughters. You can just imagine how hard it was for a disabled man living in a developing country in a rural area to provide for his 7 girls. My mother says they never went to bed hungry, the girls didn't, but she's positive her parents did, so they didn't have to. My father was raised in Havana, a much bigger city. When he was 4 days shy of his 9th birthday, his mother died. And so if he wanted to eat, he had to go work. He stopped going to school and started working at 9 years of age. He would work for the next 70 years of his life. He would never go back to school. My parents came to America in 1956. They had nothing. They had a son who was 6 years old, my older brother. They had no money, no connections, no education. And the first words my father learned in English were, "I'm looking for a job." Life here was hard when they first got here. They struggled. It was difficult. Years later, my parents admitted to me they were deeply discouraged. They even thought maybe they had made a mistake. Maybe they should go back to Cuba. You can't imagine how happy I am they didn't go back to Cuba. But my parents stuck it out. And let me tell you, less than a decade after they arrived, my father, by then simply working as a bartender at a hotel in Miami Beach, they bought a home in a safe and stable neighborhood. They would have worked for the rest of their lives, more or less, and they never made a lot of money. You never would have heard of them had I not run for office. And yet I consider my parents to be incredibly successful people, because working in those jobs as a bartender and a maid, not only did they own a home, they retired with dignity and security. And the most important thing of all for them, they lived to see all 4 of their children have a life better than their own. The reason why I share that story with you is not just to give you some insight into where I come from and how I view America, but because the story I just told you is not just mine, it's yours. I don't know your personal stories. I don't know how you grew up, but I know you're Americans. And I know that here in America, we are all literally but a generation or 2 removed from someone who did for us what my parents did for me. Whether they came from another country or not is not really relevant. We are all a generation or 2 removed from grandparents who made incredible sacrifices for your parents. Or we're all a generation removed from a father who worked 2 jobs. Or perhaps a single mother who raised you through extraordinary hardship. Or maybe I'm talking about you now. Maybe you're the one who now is doing everything you can to go to school at night and work during the day so your kids could have the chances you never had. Maybe you're the one that's put aside your own dreams and your own hopes so your kids could have the life you once wanted for yourself. The point is, this is who we are as a people. This is who we've always been, and this is what makes us special. Because in every country in the world, parents want to leave their children better off. But in almost every other society that's ever existed, your future is almost entirely dependent on who you come from and what your parents did. If your parents were rich, if your parents were connected, you had a chance, almost a guarantee of success. If they weren't, then you were only allowed to be whatever they were. We have been so different. And that was a choice, not an accident. This American dream that defines us, it didn't happen on its own. It happened because for over 2 centuries, each generation before us did what they needed to do. For over 2 centuries, each generation solved problems, confronted challenges, embraced opportunities. And for over 200 years, each generation in America has left the next better off than themselves. Well, now the moment has arrived for this generation to do its part. Now the moment has arrived for this generation to solve problems and confront challenges and embrace opportunities. And if we do, we are going to leave our children as the freest and most prosperous Americans ever. And if we fail, we will be the first generation that leaves their kids worse off than themselves. This is the seriousness of this moment. This is the choice before us. And we're not going to get a second chance this time. If we get this election wrong, if we stay on the road we are on right now, then indeed we will fail in this mission. And we're going to have to explain to our kids why we inherited a special country and they did not. Remember, every country in the world has rich people. We celebrate financial success in America. What makes us special are the millions of people that aren't trying to get rich. When you become a police officer or a firefighter, a teacher or a nurse, or any job like that, you know you're not going to make $1 billion. And that's not what you're aiming at. What you want is to make enough money to own a home and retire with dignity and raise a family and give them a chance at a life better than their own. And that's the American dream. And it isn't dead, but it's in a lot of trouble. It's slipping from our reach for far too many Americans. And it will leave us if a socialist like Bernie Sanders or someone as unqualified as Hillary Clinton is elected president of the United States. And that means this election is incredibly consequential. In this election, you have to vote not just to make a point. You have to vote to make a difference. We have to elect someone who can win, and I know that I can win. I know that I can win because unlike anyone left in this race, I can unite the Republican Party. We are being asked today on stage at every debate, will you still vote for the nominee if it's Donald Trump? You wouldn't be asked that question about anybody else. Because the truth is, 65% of people who have already voted don't want him as our nominee. And if our party is fractured and splintered, we can't win. We can't win. We can't win if we're divided against each other. We can't win if we have to spend 6 months convincing our own to vote for our frontrunner, to vote for our nominee. And if we don't win, that means we're going to wake up to the news of President Hillary Clinton. And that is an unacceptable outcome. People say this about electability. This is not just about electability. Because usually electability means we're asking you to vote for someone who's not a conservative. We're asking you to settle on them. This time you have a chance to vote for someone that is not just as conservative as anyone who's running for president, but who can win. I can win this election because I can unite this party and I can grow this party. And I can grow this party without compromising our principles, by taking our message of free enterprise and limited government and a strong national defense and our traditional values to people that don't vote for us now. Taking our message to the people who live the way I grew up, paycheck to paycheck. To people who owe thousands of dollars in student loans the way I once did. To young families raising children in a culture that undermines our faith and the things we try to instill in our children. We will take our message to them and grow our party. If you give me your vote tomorrow at the caucus and I win this nomination, we will grow this party, we will unite it, we will grow it, and we will win. And you will have a president. And you will have a president that will never ask you to hate another group of Americans in order for me to win. And you will have a president that doesn't necessarily divide us. You will have a president that loves all of the American people, including those that don't love me back. You will have a president that will work for all Americans, even the ones that don't vote for us. You will have a president that respects everyone's views, but quite frankly, is unabashed in his belief in our traditional values. A president who will never be ashamed to say that all human life is worthy of the protection of our laws. A president who isn't afraid to say, as I've said as a candidate, that you better hope that my faith influences me. Because my faith, I am a follower of the Prince of Peace. And my faith teaches me that I have an obligation to care for the less fortunate, to forgive my enemies and those who have wronged me, to love everyone. You better hope that influences our leaders. We're missing that in this country, and we need to get it back. But most of all, you will have a president that will finally ensure that we do what needs to be done. I know that times are tough. I know that people are frustrated. I know this state is facing real challenges. Both agriculture and the energy sector are facing difficult times. In Florida, the agriculture sector is a big deal too. It's facing difficult times. It always seems to. An industry so dependent upon not just unfair practices of other countries, but things like the weather that we can't control no matter what Barack Obama says. I know that times are tough, but I want you to believe, I want you to know what history is going to say about us if we make the right choice in this election. Here's what it's going to say about this generation. It's going to say that we lived in the early years of this new century in a very difficult time. The world was changing. The jobs that once sustained us were being replaced by machines or sent to other countries. There were new jobs available, but either they weren't being created here or we just didn't have the skills for those jobs because our schools weren't teaching them. It will say that we would change some incredible challenges, and that after 8 years of Barack Obama and one crazy election, we came this close to getting it wrong. But then in 2016, we remembered who we were. In 2016, we remembered what America was, and we, like the generations who came before us, rose up to the calling of our time, and that we confronted our challenges, and that we solved our problems. And because we did what needed to be done, history will say that this was the generation who left their children as the freest and most prosperous Americans that ever lived. History will say that this was the generation that didn't just save the American dream, we expanded it to reach more people and change more lives than ever before. History will say that because we did what needed to be done, the 21st century became a new American century, and we left for our children what Americans always leave their children, the single greatest nation in the history of all mankind. So I thank you. So I thank you for coming today. I appreciate you coming here in the middle of a day on a Friday. I need your help tomorrow. You give me your vote, we'll turn this country around, and we will leave for our children a country that they can be proud of, we can be proud of, and that once again inspires the world. Thank you, and God bless all of you. Thank you.